Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Team and Ambitions YouTube. We have another discussion video. We are not 24 hours removed from the end of DLC Seattle. Oh boy, was it an event! Joining me tonight, I have Dylan Lindner, sleepyGary, and of course, big ol' fish, Lewis P. Brown. He is on Melee as Lewis P. Brown. Why do I keep saying Lewis P. Brown? Because Mr. Lewis P. Brown got top 32. We are all very proud of him. How are you feeling, Lewis?
It really hit me when I got home last night that, oh man, I did the thing. Feeling really good. This is my first time topping a major tournament like this in Lorcana or any other TCG. So I'm feeling pretty proud of myself. Yeah.
I just gotta say, man, as a friend, and the captain of the team, I'm just so happy for you. You were also really cool as a cucumber. You're just it was like another day in the office to you, which is cool. And everyone around you was like, "Oh my god, are you not hyped?" You're like, "Yeah, if I win the next match, that's cool, I guess." It was.
Yeah,
it was so cool.
It was like walking through a dream, man. It was like I kept expecting to wake up and it'll be Saturday morning and I had to start 9 rounds of Swiss all over.
That's what I had to.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
I feel that.
I still remember round 4. I think that was your most difficult Swiss round. You were playing the mirror, and at the end of it, you were just like, I am done. And there was actually like a rulings call where people were getting announced overhead, and it gave you a bit of like a 20 to 30 minute break, and you needed that bad. And then for you to leave round 5, you just walked up to us and said, "Oh yeah, I got it." And you were just 5-0, casual 5-0, and you're just like, "Yeah, it's over."
Yeah, definitely my round 4 opponent. I'm looking forward to talking about that on the next video because when we break down my matchups, because boy, those were some of the best games of Lorcana I've ever played. I can't wait to break that particular match down.
Well, Lewis, we are looking forward to talking about all of your success at DLC Seattle. Let's start in this video, and the purpose of this video is to talk about the deck that you piloted masterfully to that top 32 performance. Let's look into it. I'm going to pull it up on the screen, but you're going to take us card by card. Lewis, why don't you take us off?
Sure, so we're going to go through the characters first. You start off with the 1-cost characters. Start off with 4 Chernobog's followers, creatures of evil. Simply one of the best purple 1-costs if you're not on the aggro plan. 2 1-for-1 is already pretty decent. The ability to quest and cycle it for a card, incredible. I don't think even anyone can look at this card and not be like, yeah, that's a great card.
Yeah, it's been kind of the standard of red purple since the dawn of when that card came out. So makes a lot of sense. It cantrips, it draws you a card. Sometimes it sticks on the board. Can't really complain, right?
Exactly right. Following that, I'm then running 3 of the 1-cost Magic Broom, Illuminary Keeper.
Only 3. Usually most people kind of do like a 4 and 4, right? Usually 8 1-drops is pretty standard. Why 3?
Yeah, so this is really entirely a personal preference thing. Some people were on the full 8. Some people were on 6 1-drops, usually 4 Churnabogs and 2 Brooms. The idea being that you almost always would really like to see a 1-cost on turn 1, but it's not the end of the world if you don't. And there are a lot of situations, a lot of matchups where drawing a 1-cost late, not super impactful. A Chernobog off the top when it's turn 9 or 10, it's usually just ink, which is fine, but it's not the best of top decks. So it's it's trying to hedge the bets between consistently having it on turn 1 in more games than not, but not having to draw it too often late game.
That makes a lot of sense because Broom is kind of like a worse Chernobog's followers, right?
In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. Specifically on turn 1, I think I would always prefer to have Chernobog's followers, possibly with the exception if I'm against aggro and they've got a lot of 1/1 characters. Maybe Broom is a little better. But actually, in the mid to late game, I would actually say Broom is the better top deck because you have the ability to play it for 1 instantly, and then play any other character, and don't even try to keep it for a turn. Just you pay 1 mana to draw an extra card. Sometimes that's just what you need to do.
That makes a lot of sense.
I think an interesting gameplay, as someone who doesn't really play a lot of Ruby Amethyst, that your one drops all have a cantrip component to it, and cantrip basically means a card that effectively replaces itself. So like Chernobog, when you sacrifice it, you get to draw the card, so basically you got that free lore and you got a card that would have been the Chernobog. But the Broom, there's a different gameplay with that one because you can't really get benefit of it until you play something else. So something that I saw in some of your opponents and something of you was that late game when you played it, you would oftentimes play another thing and then sacrifice the Broom without the Broom even doing anything, just to keep the card draw going. I saw a lot of the Ruby Amethyst players around, like the tables I was watching, do that to play, and it seemed like an interesting cantrip. Like, I can do this. But it also seemed like a desperation play, because at late game, obviously you don't want the Broom, but you want something else more impactful. Did that seem like super valuable to you in any of your games?
Yes, very much so. It came up a lot. There's just a lot of times in game states where you can guess that a 1-2 has a very high likelihood of just kind of incidentally being removed from the board. Not even necessarily they're like really trying to, but like, if you're against a steel deck, maybe they're going to have grab your swords. Like, there's just no way to reliably be sure this Broom is going to get me the lore before I'm able to play a character and draw the card. So rather than risk it, sometimes it's just better to hedge the bets, take the tax of 1 ink and draw an extra card that turn, set yourself up for success later on.
If every character basically just said pay 1 to draw a card when you play it, I think I would do that all the time.
There are so many of those cards in Lorcana. The most obvious one besides these two being Popsicle in red-blue and blue-steel. It's just a really strong effect for 1 ink, particularly when it comes attached to another useful effect. And then following those 1 costs, this is not a huge innovation as such, because I was hardly the only person at the tournament doing this, but I am on the 4 Cusco Wanted Llama instead of 4 Flynn Rider Enemy.
That's crazy, because, Flynn gains you 3 lore. That's a lot of lore where I come from. And Cusco, he's no Flynn, right? Usually Flynn is seen as the card you slam against the ramp decks and they cry. They can't do anything about it. You gain 30 billion lore off Flynn and you win the game off the back of 1 card. But Cusco? Why Cusco?
So the thought process I finally arrived at was, yes, Flynn is a huge immediate threat. Your opponent has to deal with it either by removing him or at least matching your power immediately, which, as you just said, the ramp decks, particularly red-blue, just cannot do. If you're on the play as red-purple and you're playing Flynn and you play Flynn on turn 2, the standard decks for red-blue actually just have no answer until at minimum 4 ink. So maybe they'll play a Tipo, you'll get 1 activation, and then at best they can play the Grandma Tala to stop you. But they can't even always do that. Sometimes their turn 4 has to be Huron Flaversham, so you actually get 2 activations. Or they have to spend, even though they have 4 ink, they have to use Brawl, and maybe they are not able to have a Popsicle in hand, so they can't even use that extra ink they have. The reason I ultimately landed on Flynn Rider, or excuse me, rather, the reason I landed on not Flynn Rider, is because in kind of every other situation except exactly turn 2, I would rather have a Cusco in my hand. In every other matchup, Flynn Rider is often at best a 2 cost 2/2, which, sometimes that's relevant enough to be like, okay, but particularly against decks like Green Steel, Amber Steel, anything that's putting actual power on the board, which like Green Purple is going to play Bonsai, the 2 cost 3/2 Hyena. Cusco's, or rather Flynn, excuse me, is simply not that impactful. And particularly, even when you play him and even when he triggers, you feel almost compelled to just not ever quest with him, just leave him standing straight up. You can't really do a whole lot. Whereas with Cusco, you can turn him sideways, throw him into the wind. You're not really concerned what's going to happen to that poor little llama, because he's always going to draw you a card.
I care.
By the end of the movie, we care.
Yeah, that's true. We didn't care in the beginning.
You kind of alluded to this. This is probably one of the bigger delineations between the Ruby Amethyst builds, which is, should you be on Cusco or should you be on Flynn Rider? And I feel like that hasn't been a real discussion until just a couple of weeks ago. kind of with a rise of some of the other cards that are in your list. What made you kind of switch over? Like, when did you switch over, and when did you know, yes, Cusco was the card, and I know this is the one that's going to take me to the finish line?
So the moment I switched over was I actually competed in the Friday competitive constructed event at 11 a.m. Didn't do particularly hot, but it felt right. It was mostly for testing purposes, and like the lines of just playing Cusco on turn, turning him sideways as many times as I wanted. Is he gaining me the 3 Laura Flynn? Certainly not. But was he gaining me usually a minimum of 1, often 2, sometimes yes, 3 lore? It definitely happened because opponents will sometimes be really hesitant to spend their character's turn challenging it when like, well, I've got this 2 questing Sisu. Do I really spend the turn challenging this 1/2 Cusco, or do I just quest for 2 or sing a song and so on and so forth? So it's you almost put your opponents in a prisoner's dilemma of like, do I deal with this now and immediately give them a card which will make their next turn flexible, or do I just accept that this guy is going to gain a bunch of lore on me?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on it, which is that it's the fear of that card in hand, right? Because they're like, oh, it's just a 1/2 that only quests for 1, and it's like I can let it live. It doesn't like challenge anything really well. It doesn't really do anything. But the idea that, oh, I might give you that be prepared you need if I challenge this Cusco, it's just a psychological weapon in your toolkit, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, that goes both ways. I was fortunate that the mirrors I played the event, they were on the Flynn version. I say I was fortunate. That's not actually true. By being on the Flynn, I'm actually in the mirror, or rather by being on Cusco. I can't stop messing that up. In the mirror where they have Flynn Rider, I'm actually a little disadvantaged because unless I open up with specifically Chernobog's followers, there's a good chance their Flynn is going to activate once because I can't counter their Flynn with my Flynn. So that absolutely did come up, but I cannot say that I regret the change I made.
Fair enough.
And then following Cusco Wanted Llama, we're going to get into a couple of very standard things. For Madam Mim Snake, this is not going to surprise anyone who's familiar with the deck. It was, back in the day, simply the best tempo to drop you could do. That's not really the case anymore. I found that doing it on turn 2 wasn't as great nowadays because a 3/3, while strong, isn't quite cutting the mustard as much anymore. But that said, it is one of the ways that you can cycle so much value out of bouncing your rabbits, your goats, your removal characters like the sitting red ladies. Just an incredible card, always useful. 2 ink to bounce something to maybe replay it immediately is always going to be relevant. No surprises there. And then immediately following Madam Mim Snake is Madam Mim Fox. 4 of those, absolutely no surprise. One of the best cards in the game. It's the one of the best ways to claw back some tempo if your opponent is going much faster than you. It's also another way to get great value out of characters. The Merlins, the Sitting Red Ladies, just an incredible card. No surprises here. Following that, I am playing 3 of the Merlin Crabs. This card was great for me all weekend. I know a lot of red purple lists are dropping it in either lower numbers or dropping it entirely. I am extremely glad I had it for I think every single matchup I had. It helped. It helped like a crab, and then a second crab was helpful for taking out opposing harm flavorshums. It was extremely useful in the red purple mirrors I played. It came up in even the green steel matchups. It combos particularly well with Cusco Wanted Llama. Attacking with a 4/4 that's going to draw you a card, or rather a 4 attack character that's going to draw you a card, just extremely helpful. And kind of harking back to what you say, they're like, oh, this 1/2 that's not going to really do anything. I'll just let it be on the board. Well, suddenly I've got this body that you purposely ignored, and now I'm able to hit one of your characters for 4. Particularly, again, mentioning the mirror, opposing Sisu and Bolden Warriors who will be coming up. Just extremely tempo positive. The ability to say with 6 ink, play a crab, play a Madam Mim Fox, immediately bouncing the crab and giving the fox the extra 3 attack, lets you run into the opposing queen's castle and remove it immediately. Extremely valuable. Just a really good card, and I'm very glad I had it this weekend.
Yeah, we've seen kind of crab ebb and flow out of the sort of meta deck builds of red purple, and I'm curious, like, people are so hot and cold on it. They're like, oh, I'll play 0, I play 1, I play 2. There's like no correct number of crab, and it's so interesting because like I never understood why we're so polarized on this card, and there's lists where like he was played as a Zero for so long, and then like 2 3 weeks later, oh, you gotta be playing crab, what are you doing? Like, so it's so weird, the trends in red purple.
Yeah, I will say particularly. I'm going to harken back to set 2 and early set 3. People were really sleeping on Merlin Crab. He was not seen as like a viable thing to put in your deck until he was. So I think it's a crab. It's a crab. It's a card.
It is a crab too.
It is a crab. I can't stop myself. But it's a card it's really hard to like read it and envision where it's going to be great until you play with it. That said, I'm not going to go so far as to say that playing 0 is outright wrong. Kind of the thing about red purple is there's so much personal preference on how you want to fill out like the last few slots of the deck, how you want to like make it play for yourself, which is one of the reasons I really like it. But I was very happy I had it this weekend. I was very happy I had 3. Following that, I am playing 3 of the 3-cost Sisu Emboldened Warrior. This is just an incredible 3-drop. I'm going to go out and say it. I believe that this is the single best tempo 3-cost card you can play that is not a shift character. In a vacuum, this is just an incredible turn 3 play. It's often at minimum a 5/4 questing for 2, sometimes more if they've done something like refill their hand a little bit. It's just an incredible threat. The reason I'm only on 3 is because I'm not playing Flynn Rider. It is less important for me to be able to slam it on 3 right away to ensure I'm getting that Flynn trigger. It's still one of the best things I could be doing, but I'm not as sad if I miss it after I play Cusco, whether I'd be more sad if I play a Flynn and then don't have the follow-up.
I actually think this is really interesting because one of the things that I've seen from like other decks or talking with other people is that without the Flynn, obviously Sisu loses a lot of value, and people are like, why would I play Sisu if I don't have a Flynn? Like, I don't have the benefit of a Flynn. And for me, conceptually, it made very little sense. Like, Sisu is still a 4 willpower 2 lore thing that you drop on turn 3. Like, people play Lawrence in Amber Steel and they say this card's amazing, like, we love this. It's just a 4/4 that has a potential to be 0/4. Like, why are we down on Sisu when Lawrence is effectively the same exact card?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I completely agree with that. I don't know, I would not have been comfortable writing up a list with 0 Sisus in my deck. I know people are, but I did not want to cut it. And I actually, those 3 Sisus are why this deck is the 63 card special, because I just could not figure out what to cut.
Yay.
And then following that, we got a couple more box standards, no surprises here. We've got 4 Merlin Goats, and I'll just go ahead and read that into 4 Merlin Rabbits. This isn't a surprise. Although it should be mentioned that there are variations of Red Purple that are playing no goats. I don't understand them. I don't think I want to understand them. Goat is a good card. It's the way you close out so many games. It's not usually the best turn 4 you can play, but it's also not a bad turn 4. Turn 4, 4/3 is beef for sure. Instantly gains you a lore. That is a perfectly fine card. Like, even outside the context of the bounce mechanic, that's very strong. I have struggled to find the logic of including 0 Merlin. Goat, I could understand cutting him down to 3, maybe even 2. That's not like mind-boggling to me, but I've had real difficulty wrapping my head around the idea of playing 0.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a great card. It helps you in so many situations, because sometimes 1 goat turns into what, 8. I played a game where 1 goat turned into 9 lore or something like that. It was crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then following up on Goat, Merlin Rabbit, I mean, there's just not a lot to say. It is the draw engine of the deck. It is quite possibly one of the most efficient draw cards in the game. It is guaranteed to draw you 2 cards. Granted, not immediately, but it's going to draw you 2 cards. It'll gain you a lore, or it'll sing you a song, or it'll challenge something even sometimes. 2 willpower isn't a lot, but sometimes it's enough. Often games are made or lost, or rather, games are won or lost depending on whether you saw at least 1 or 2 rabbits.
As someone who just played green purple, and a very more aggressive version of green purple. One of the things that we do with our rabbits is we get fairly like risky with it because one, we know more draws coming with Clarabelle, theoretically, hopefully, and two, it gives you a target, right? Because ideally, the more they want to target your rabbit, the less focus they're putting on a merfolk or a bonsai or whatever. And red purple is a little different, right? Because like once that draw engine's gone, it's gone. You don't have a way of getting it back. You don't have a backup plan. Well, not really. You kind of do now. We'll get to that. But what's like your philosophy into like how do you treat your rabbits? Is it based on like if you have another rabbit handy? Is it based on the other cards that are in your hand? Like what kind of dictates how you're gonna approach your turn 4 rabbit and then going into your turn 5?
You protect that precious little fur ball with everything you have. So what you said, if you have another rabbit in hand, absolutely, you can be a little riskier for it. But yes, games are often won or lost by your ability to keep that single rabbit in and out of your hand. If you don't have the ability to bounce it that turn, you're gonna have to think really hard whether or not you want to turn it sideways, whether that's for gaining a lore, challenging, or singing a song. It's really, really important to keep that engine going. Even just your opponent knowing that you bounced that rabbit, so you could always have the option to draw more cards, is very valuable. It's you gotta keep at least one rabbit in circulation. Following up from the forecast, I am running 2 Elsa, the Fifth Spirit. This is a very personal preference card on the number you're running. I think it's smart to run some number, but I'm only on 2. Some lists are on the full 4. Some lists are on 3. It's a very flexible card. It can do a lot of things. Its primary job is, of course, to take out those Shift Diablo cards. It is the reason. It's the innovation that was made post Vegas. Once we realized that Diablo is in fact not gone, it's just what you need to do. But it also comes up on a lot of things, like say tapping in the mirror, tapping or rather exerting your opponent's Merlin Rabbit so that you can take it out when they thought it might have been safe. That's really useful because suddenly their draw engine is shut off. Turning sideways Flynn's to kick him out when they thought that he might be safe. Very useful. It comes up a lot. It's primarily for the green steel matchup, but you're not particularly sad to see it in other matchups. The only matchup where it's really not great at all would be red blue. They don't really have any targets that you really want to hit it in. But again, even then, after they play Flaversham to draw 2 cards, maybe you turn it sideways so that they don't get to draw 2 more. That certainly came up for me.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Did you feel like 2 was enough though? Because it sounds like it was a pretty useful card, and 2, I can't imagine you saw it like a lot.
So it's true I didn't see it a lot, and I will say that, spoiler alerts for the next video, I got a little bit lucky with my Swiss rounds. I only faced Green Steel once in round 2, where it was very impactful. I would say the one question mark I actually have about my deck is maybe I should have had 3 Elsa. I don't know what would change, whether I would go to the 64 card special or swap something out, but that certainly would not be a crazy thing to do.
As someone who, played Blurple and played Green Purple, like we don't have any other answers for potentially removing things. So Elsa is like, oh yeah, easy 4 of, not even a question. So it's wild to think that like that card, which is like almost premier and elite removal for Blurple or for Green Purple, is just like, 2. That's just how elite Ruby Amethyst really is.
Yeah, oh, definitely. For other purple variations with other colors, it's insane. With red purple, you have rubies to have a lot of removal, so it's a great backup. I'm certainly glad that I had it, but you don't always have to have it, or you're just in big trouble. And then following up on Elsa as the other 5-cost character for Maui, Hero to All. This is not a surprise to anyone. It's been one of the single best red cards since it came out. It's probably still one of the most efficient cards in the game. It is very often a 2-for-1. It'll immediately challenge or remove a character, and then they have to either spend removal on it or another character to get rid of it. 6/5 Rush is just the beefest of beef, right? He's really good, and even if like they try to play around situations where, I'll make him, because he's reckless, he'll have to challenge this 2/2 that I don't care about. then he just sings Friends on the Other Side for you, and it's all great. I can't imagine playing less than 4. Some lists are doing like a 3-3 split of Elsa and Maui. I don't think I would be comfortable with less than 4 of him in my deck. Moving on from our 5-cost characters, we're going to move into our sitting red lady territory. I am playing a split of 2 Lady Tremaine Imperious Queens and 3 Madame Medusa the Boss. So this is another point of personal preference in red purple. You can run 4 Medusa, 1 Tremaine. You could run 4 Medusa, 0 Tremaine. I really like Lady Tremaine. She fades in and out of the meta a lot. But I do have a pet opinion that if you are going to play Lady Tremaine, you should play 2. The shift line of shifting the second one on top of the first one can be so incredibly backbreaking. It came up for me a lot this weekend. It is one of the single best things you can do, in my opinion. It's my favorite thing to do in Lorcana. It's just really, really strong, particularly when I'll set up the scenario. Turn 6, you play Lady Tremaine to remove their threat, and they don't have a way to remove her. They develop their own board or whatever. And then on turn 7 with 7 ink, with 4 ink, you shift another Lady Tremaine on top of Lady Tremaine. They have to banish one of their characters, and then for the remaining 3 ink, you either play a Madame Mim, Snake, or Fox, and you take both of those Lady Tremaines back into your hand. Your opponent knows you're sitting on 2 Lady Tremaines in hand. You are borderline holding them hostage with those red ladies in your hand. And then 3 Madame Medusa. As powerful and excellent as Lady Tremaine is, sometimes you need to be able to remove that card. I need that off the board right now. And the 4/4 body is actually very relevant. It lines up with a lot of things. It's just a great card, and it's not. There's a reason there's more Medusa in my deck than there are Lady Tremaines.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that Tremaine kind of fell out of favor when Medusa really hit the scene. 1, the targeted removal, and then 2, the fact that Tremaine itself can be Medusa'd, so it's horrible into mirrors. That's obviously his biggest detriment. And the other bonus of Lady Tremaine, well, other than it being shiftable, was the fact that it could quest for 2, which is not irrelevant. So, like, obviously Tremaine has intrinsic value, but when one removal takes out the other removal, and the other removal can't actually take out the other removal, we have a problem.
Yeah, no, that's you hit the nail on the head. That is exactly the dilemma. I think Lady Tremaine is going to continue to be a card that fades in and out of prevalence. I really like her. I expect I will become a fanboy of her for how great she was for me this weekend. But it's not wrong to exclude her from your deck. It's very much personal preference.
Let me ask you this then. Why are we seeing Tremaine back particularly? Because if you think like, oh, Green Steel's back on the menu, boys, I would say Tremaine is not good. Like, they can go wide. It doesn't really kill anything. Like, why Tremaine back in the list? Why is she making this resurgence?
So a couple of reasons I would say. First of all, as Andrew just mentioned, 2 lore is more than 1. And that matters a lot of the time. Following that, most Green Steel lists are on the Cove location, which increases the character's stats. That's not relevant for Diablo, but since they are on the Beast Tragic Hero, that bumps him up to 4 attack, which means he is no longer removed by Medusa. Stuff like that. And then in the red-blue matchup, you need a way to deal with Tamatoa. It's not the only tool you have, but there are characters in this meta with more than 3 attack that if you do not remove, you are very likely going to lose the game. You need as many ways to deal with them as you can reasonably fit in. And Tremaine happens to be one of the premier options Red Purple has for that.
I'll add in a 4th, which is I saw this to a player that was next to me. How do you deal with Ward? I saw a red purple go against a green steel. They were both effectively just top decking. I think red purple had like 2 cards in his hand, but the other guy drew Prince John. They didn't have Tremaine, and then drew Hypnotize immediately after that. Drew 2 cards and immediately came right back into the game. And it's like if you had the Tremaine, and I'm pretty sure he had the Medusa. I think he played it maybe for nothing, just to have a body on the board. But if he had Tremaine, game over. Absolute game over.
Yep, Ward is absolutely a mechanic. You still have to think about Prince John definitely being the premier example, but there are other Ward cards in the game, not necessarily that are like at the top of the meta, but you'll run into stuff that if you aren't able to target it with Mana Medusa, you start thinking, huh, I don't know what to do. So moving on from the characters, let's move into our non-song actions. For Brawl, there's very little to talk about here. It is one of the most efficient removal cards Lorcana has. There are so many very important, very relevant cards in the meta that have 2 or less attack. It's how you don't immediately lose the game when Green Steel opens up with the Diablo shift line. In this version, it's great for taking out opposing Flins. It's really important against aggro, which was very prevalent at Seattle, I would say. I would not want to run less than 4. It's always inkable, so it's just good. It's just a good card. And then following up from Brawl, probably the big innovation for Red Purple of the weekend, to be clear, not my innovation by any means, is the addition of Finders Keepers. This was a card that when it was first revealed, there was definitely talk about it. The text, draw 3 cards, is a great line of text. But the issue was it's not a song, it costs 5. People weren't really sure when you were supposed to play this card. I will happily admit I was a Finders Keeper skeptic. Right up until post Friday competitive event where it was extremely strong against me, and then that night I added it to my deck to bring on Saturday. It's difficult to see immediately when you would play it. It is almost never a turn 5 play. The only situations it's a turn 5 play are, of course, if you have nothing else to do, sure, or versus Green Steel when they've discarded a lot of your hand and suddenly you refill for 3. Hopefully they don't have their Diablo on the board, so you're not just giving them 3 free cards. But it felt really good. It felt great as a turn 8, 9, 10 play where you need to dig for something, or in the mirror where we're both kind of running out of gas. I would say all of my opponents, my mirror opponents for Red Purple, were on it, and if they had it and I didn't, I think those games would have gone very, very differently.
I think it's also important to note too, again, against other red decks that play Be Prepared, there are turns where you just don't want to develop the board because you're like, I'm already putting enough pressure that you have to Be Prep me. Why would I put more pressure on? I'll just spend 5 to draw 3 cards and just be like, you can Be Prep me, but here's 8 cards and I'm just going to replay the board again, so good luck.
That's a great point, actually. Yeah, doing that, because when your opponent is Be Prepping you as Red Purple, they always have to think, okay, I have to be prepared here. It's the right thing to do. But if he plays in response some locations like Queen's Castle on me, that's going to be really tough to deal with. And if I spend my turn drawing 3 cards and I already have a board, the odds of me having the castle to respond to the post Beaver Prep turn go way, way up, right? So yeah, that's exactly right. I don't expect this card to go anywhere, at least until set 6, because who knows what's going to happen then. But certainly for the remainder of the current set, you expect to see it in Red Purple.
I'll just give a shout out to fellow Team and Ambitions member Carlos, who had the thought that Finders Keepers was going to be a good card from the very beginning. I mean, truthfully, for the first 2 months, it probably wasn't that good. It wasn't until Green Steel hit the market again, back to its usual shenanigans, and then we realized, how you beat discard? Just draw 3 cards. It's literally like a one-sided half whole new world. Like, it feels horrible when it gets played against you.
Yep, huge shout out to Carlos Nalar. You're right. He's been preaching the gospel for months. I did not believe him, and I genuinely wish that I had listened earlier and gotten a little more practice in, because while I managed to find the right spots going into Saturday, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to know when to play with my Finders Keepers.
Yeah, it seems like a card that has like a lot of ceiling to it, right? Because clearly draw 3 is just good, but like when do you do it? When is the correct play? It seems like there's a lot of decision making and decision trees that you need to do to decide when is the perfect time to play this card, which makes it an interesting card. I mean, look, I'll say Carlos was wrong and until he was right, but he said it was good, so let's do it. Go Carlos. He knows what's up. He sees the future. Third eye open.
There it is. All right, and then moving on from our simple actions, we move into the songs. there's not going to be a whole lot to talk about here. This is super bog standard. 4 friends on the other side.
Yep.
0 ink, draw 2 cards. Turns out to be pretty good. Even 3 ink, draw 2 cards. Sometimes that's just good enough. It's pretty good. The only thing I'm going to mention here is that this is my personal opinion. Red purple players need to stop singing Friends on the Other Side with their Sisu Emboldened Warriors.
Yes.
Stop doing that. It is almost never correct. Sometimes it's correct, of course. The game state matters. What you need to find matters. But on turn 4, you've just played the Sisu. You have the Friends in hand. Quest with Sisu. Don't worry about it. You would much rather play a rabbit that turn and use the rabbit to sing it later. Now, sometimes you need to find more ink so that you are able to play the rabbit. Yeah, of course, context matters. But most of the time, Sisu should not be singing Friends.
I have a strong controversial opinion. That's probably not too controversial. I think most of the time singing Friends is actually incorrect. I think in a lot of matchups, you have to be the aggressor in the matchup. So I'll see a lot of people playing red-purple against like blue-red, for example, and they're just like singing Friends instead of questing. And I'm like, you don't understand. They win the late game. You have to be you're the aggressor in this game. Just start turning sideways. And sure, if you need to sing because you need the extra ink or to develop a more better tempo play, go for it. But there's plenty of times where Rabbit should just be turning sideways. Sisu should just be turning sideways. Goat should just be turning sideways. But a lot of Red Purple's mindset is just like, if I draw cards, then I get to draw more cards, which means I draw more cards.
Yeah, as good as drawing cards is, as much as we love to draw cards, sometimes you'll end the game with 8, 9 in hand, and you just lost because you didn't actually do anything.
Singing was definitely better when your main sing target was 3-drop Maleficent, the 2/2, where you already drew your card and it doesn't do anything but sit there. You're like, yeah, go ahead. I don't need you anymore, Maleficent. Sing this song. Let me draw more. In Blurple, obviously we sing a lot with the Mickey because it already did the ink effect. In Green Purple, a lot of like kit. Once you used your kit, like, go ahead, take it, fine, whatever. Just don't hit my bonsai, like, whatever, I don't care. What's the high value target to sing with in Red Purple? Like, is it Crab? And really, if it is Crab, that means you turn 3'd Crab. That's probably not your best play. And if it was, you're in a desperate spot.
No, and I mean, again, context is king. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. But if you are not in dire straits, just gain 2 lore. 2 lore is really good. The current iterations of Red Purple don't have a lot of 2 questers. We used to be on the Surfer Minis. We're not on those anymore. We have slowed down a little bit from the old days, even with the Goat Bounce package. And sometimes that 2 lore is going to make or break your win or loss. Then moving on from Friends, for Be Prepared, what is there to say? It's still one of the it's best card one of the best cards in the game. The only sure way to say all the characters on the board are going away. Particularly, I'm gonna point out that because I'm on Cusco, I'm even less hesitant to wipe my own board than I would be normally because I'm gonna draw more and more cards. It's just really, really good. And then finally, we're gonna move into our locations. The one bit of spice I can kind of claim is not my thing because I'm hardly the only person doing it, but I am playing a singleton of The Library, A Gift for Belle. This card has been so good for me this entire set. It was good for me in set champs. It was good for me on Friday, even though I didn't perform great. It was amazing for me on Saturday. I love this card. It drew me so many cards. It gained me so much lore. It is just so good. And reading is fun.
Let me ask you this then: if you're praising your local public library, why just one?
So the reason I'm on just one is I was originally on 2, but I cut 1 to go up in Merlin Crabs while still being not so far above the 60 card limit. Library is a difficult card to play with. It's very rarely the best turn 3 play, although it can be a very good turn 3 versus red-blue in particular. It's a card similar to Finder Keeper in some ways, where you would like to see it on turn 6 or 7 where you've got a board, you know that you're going to spend this turn doing some trades, and maybe you don't have the cards to like fill out your curve, your ink really well. So you throw down the library, you move Fox to it that maybe already rushed something, is with like 1 damage on it. Suddenly your Fox is drawing you a card. It synergizes incredibly well with the 1 cost, obviously, when they do their banishments effect, whether it's questing with Chernobog's followers or playing another character with Broom. They're drawing you 2 cards for the minor tax of 1. We talked about earlier how with Broom, the tax of 1 ink to draw a card is pretty good. Granted, you have to play the library for 3 first, but once it's established on the board, the tax of 1 ink to draw a card every time your characters get banished is just really, really good. 8 health for the location is really, really tough for a lot of decks to deal with. There's very few things that answer 8 health cleanly. It's usually going to take a minimum of 2 characters to challenge it, either over 1 turn or 1 character over 2 turns. It's tricky to find the spots to play it, but once it's in play and active, I felt so incredibly confident going forward. And then following that, for the Queen's Castle Mirror Chamber, this card is insane. It is just insane. My pet phrase since the card came out is, I believe that every single number on the Queen's Castle is wrong. It should not. It should either one of any of these. It should not cost 4. It should not gain you 2 lore. It should not cost only 1 to move. Those numbers are bonkers. You do have to be. You have to figure out when is the time to play it. The best time, of course, is right after your opponent uses Be Prepared against you. That is just the backbreaker of, oh my gosh, they had the Queen's Castle to answer my Be Prepared. This is a nightmare for me. But even not then, if you can find ways to put it in and they either can't easily answer it, or they have to commit a lot of things to answer it, or they have to not answer your characters in order to answer it, it's just so strong.
Yeah, I mean, what is there to say? Queen's Castle, busted.
Really good card. And I'm actually going to point out a specific interaction for, spoiler alert, my top 64 opponent. It was a red-purple mirror, but he was on the 0 Merlin Crab list, which meant that I knew that if he did not already have anything established, his board was empty, that I could play the Queen's Castle, and there's no way that he could take it out in 1 turn. His Maui doesn't take it out. His Fox doesn't take it out. Well, yeah, again, the only way he can take it out is if he has anything on board so that he can 1-drop plus Maui or double Fox that turn. It's a real advantage just knowing that. And yeah, that is the deck list. 63 card special. I know a lot of people would be hesitant to that. I am one of you. This is genuinely the first time I've ever sleeved up more than the 60 card minimum. But I gotta say, it felt fine. Particularly in a deck like Red Purple that expects to draw more cards on average than anything but a whole new world decks. You're gonna see a good amount of your deck. So just having the toolbox of all the options really worked out in my favor. If I had to do Saturday all over again, I think I would bring this exact same list.
Well, that answers the very next question, which I was going to ask if you were going to make any edits, but this is it. Lewis, we cannot say how proud we are of you. Top 32 is amazing. This is Team Inhibition's first day 2 performer, so that will forever be in the record books. Don't feel bad for your boys. We did not leave empty-handed. Of course, we are beaten by Mr. Lewis here. Go ahead and flash them. There they are.
Yeah, so pretty. So pretty.
But we will have to get into that in another video. Thank you all for joining us. If you have any thoughts, or if you happen to have played Lewis at DLC Seattle, please let us know. Drop it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Give us some feedback. Let us know how you're feeling. This is one of our best players that we got, and he had a blast. He represented us well. We're really proud of you, buddy.
Thank you so much. And actually, piggyback on what you just said, I want to shout out each and every one of my opponents. You are all great. If you happen to see this video, it was a pleasure to play with all of you. Obviously, I'm sorry that I beat you, but I think every single one of you was very gracious. So yeah, thanks very much for that.
Dylan, any last comments that you got?
Make sure to tune in for the next video where we kind of explain how you got to those rise so that you too can become a top 32 champion. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because we're going to go into great details about how you can win your next DLC.
All right. Thank you, Lewis. Thank you, Dylan, for joining me tonight. Everyone, thanks for watching, and we will see you in a couple of days for our Seattle review video.
Bye.